But there's a lot of analogies with climate science and our microbiome, except the big difference, and the reason I love it is because we have agency and autonomy over our decisions. And the more information we have, the more power we have to make educated decisions, even if they're imperfect.
Mhm.
We have control over decisions about how we eat and drink and think and live.
Mm.
And I really, really love that as a child of chronic disease in pediatric hospitals and rheumatologists, and really not having a sense of agency over my body when I was a sick kiddo, to come to an adult space and know that I can biohack and take supplements and change my lifestyle. And yes, I make decisions that are poor sometimes because I'm human, but I think it's so important that we regain a sense of agency over who we are and how we are able to make decisions about our health in a way that puts safety back.
Hi, I'm Missy Macholka, the Menopause Midwife. I'm here to break down all the things about menopause and hormones that seem overly complicated, which is pretty much everything. With over 10 years of experience catching babies and 2 decades of intuitive massage therapy practice, I have spent the last few years deep diving into all things menopause to figure out why so many women are suffering and why there seems to be so much confusion about hormones and menopause. Calling on my midwifery experience and my desire to help women attain and maintain full autonomy, I will stay next to you during this life transition and help to explain the options as you step into your power and find optimal health.
Hello, my lovelies, and welcome back to the Menopause Midwife. Today is Friday, May 23rd, 2025, and we have a subject today that is rife for bad puns. So I will try to keep them to a minimum because my teenagers remind me all the time that I am not funny. But there might be a little tongue-in-cheek anyway, because today we are diving into the world of the microbiome, hormones, and poop. My guest today is Dr. Andrea McBeth, a trailblazer in functional medicine and founder of Thaena Biotic, with a background in clinical microbiology, biochemistry, and a doctorate in naturopathic medicine. Andrea's work bridges the gap between lab science and terrain-based medicine, which, simply put, focuses on creating a healthy internal soil so that disease, like weeds, can't take root. Her career began with a focus on gut health, treating functional GI disorders, launching one of the first stool banks for C. diff, and later teaching microbiome-focused courses at the graduate level. Her passion for the gut-brain immune connection inspired her to create ThaenaBiotic, the first human-derived postbiotic. Known to many as Dr. Dre, her full bio and impressive list of accolades can be found in the show notes. Welcome, Dr. Dre.
Thank you. I am excited to be here, and thank you so much for having me. Enjoy what you do, and it's great to talk to people who are providing information and resources to patients, because I just think there's so much we don't know about the microbiome, and it's so relevant to everything we do.
It sure is. And it's like, I always think it might help our listeners have a little background as to like why I even asked you on the podcast, because it's like hormones, poop, microbiomes. What are we going to talk about? But I heard about fecal microbiota transplant way back in the day when I was doing midwifery training. And we were talking about why we don't want to clean the face and the baby off really thoroughly after birth because we want to preserve that microbiome. And when we were having that conversation, it just led into somebody saying, "Hey, have you heard of this thing called FMT?" And I was like, my mind was blown and I was so intrigued by it. But at that time, it was only something you could do if you were like really, really sick and you were in the hospital under very strict conditions. At that time, all we really knew about the microbiome was that we didn't want to blow it up with too many antibiotics. We knew
Yeah.
that for sure. And we knew that we wanted to take acidophilus, which I always feel like I'm aging myself when I say that because we used to buy it at the health food store in the fridge and we would drink it. And it was kind of like kefir and yogurt all together and then acid.
Still good today.
I know it's so good. It's very nostalgic for me. And I really credit my mom for knowing to do that back in the day. But one of my reps for Quicksilver, which everybody knows is one of my very favorite products because of their delivery systems, my rep, Kristen, got a shout out to her. She said, "Hey, have you heard of Thaena Biotic?" And she told me about it. And I was like, yes, we have to have this on for my ladies because it is revolutionary in how you can treat the gut and treat all kinds of things. So I'm super excited to have you here today, Andrea, because you have created something that's just phenomenal. Let's jump into some questions. I always like to get the awkward stuff out of the way first. So, can you, for those of us who are still the listeners who aren't really sure what we're even talking about, we're talking about poop. I said FMT, fecal microbiota transplant. People are probably like, what in the world is this? Can you tell us in a crapsule what Thaena is before we move on?
Yeah, and I would say I'll also explain fecal transplant is the concept of delivering healthy stool to the GI tract or the microbiome of a recipient. And it's been around for century Chinese literature. It's a standard of care in veterinary medicine. We moved away from it when we understood that there was disease transmission fecal orally and hygiene and kind of the revolution with antibiotics and systems of sanitation. But then recently, like in the 1950s and then again in the 1910s, we rediscovered as we started to understand the microbiome that there's all these really good acidophilus type, commensal bacteria. And what we found, what science found, and scientists, and in particularly a Australian researcher brought back, was this idea that we could treat the microbiome that's out of balance in the context of a disease like C. diff, which is an overgrowth of a bad bacteria, with healthy poop from a donor. And 80 to 90+% effective at treating antibiotic resistant C. diff. And we've been sort of unwinding why that is ever since then. And so I'll give the context that giving healthy donor poop to people that are sick is not a new concept, but it's a new understanding of a frame of reference of what good microbes are and how the microbiome interfaces. And so in the work that we were doing in fecal transplant, we then kind of took another leap and said, well, there's still risk of infectious disease and it's hard to know what's going on here. We just don't understand. In the same way, we can't make synthetic blood because we don't understand it enough. We can't make the same good things in the poop yet to replace that. We decided to say, okay, if we have really healthy people and they're eating all the right things, what if we separate out the infectious disease risk and kind of some of the things we know can potentially help, but also carry risk, and just focus on the little small nutrients that a healthy microbiome uses. And that's what ThaenaBiotic is. So we take healthy donor poop and we sterilize it with high heat and high pressure, the same way you would sterilize equipment for surgery or something like that. And then that allows us to look at just what we now call postbiotics. And the postbiotics from a healthy donor poop are much more complex and rich in diversity than, say, what you would get from an acidophilus, because it represents thousands of different bacteria that we still don't know how to grow outside the human gut.
Oh, that was such a great explanation. Thank you. I think it really brings together, what it is and how to do it. You mentioned the sterilization process. And, just from a background of knowledge with probiotics, you always say, don't get it too hot because it'll die and all of that stuff. So it just leads me to this question. How do the good things not die when you're autoclaving your samples?
So again, it was a big leap to say, well, what if we don't care that everything dies, even the good stuff, because they make what we call postbiotics. And I'll take a step back. So we know what probiotics are, right? The acidophilus is a probiotic. We take good bacteria, they grow in fermented foods. And traditionally, a lot of the emphasis has been on keeping those alive, right? Because what we thought was that they would grow and replace. So you're like planting new plants in the forest. What turns out to be true is it's more complicated, as is such in nature. We don't actually need most of these probiotics to be alive, actually,
Oh.
because they have a pass through interface. They change the environment and they secrete all these molecules in the same way that when we communicate with each other, we can change the environment we're in. And so it turns out there is a component of all probiotics that benefit when they're dead. And the same thing is true for the stool. And so we call them postbiotics because there's prebiotics, which are the foods that we eat that the bugs eat. The probiotics are the bugs, and then the postbiotics are the small molecules that they make. For example, butyrate, which some people may have heard of, or urolithin A is a postbiotic, or bile acids are postbiotics. And it's just any of these small molecules that bacteria are making, sort of as like our super nutrient farm that is providing us with a different kind of nutrients that we can't make ourselves.
Now that's super helpful to just know that they're working even when they're dead. It's fascinating. I'm still learning all of that, and it's kind of blowing my mind because I do love butyrate, know a little bit about urolithin A, and then you're saying bile what did you say? Bile
Bile acids.
acids are also a postbiotic.
Yeah,
Okay.
and they're one of my favorites. We'll do, like, a little tangent on bile
Yeah,
acids
I love it.
because I love them so much. So we used to think of bile acids as only so they have this cool thing where our liver makes them, they come into the gut, the microbes change them, right? That
Mhm.
process of changing them is what turns them into a postbiotic, and then we used to just think that they were only there to, get things excreted out of our body. But it turns out that's not true. And it's a gross oversimplification. And they have all these cool specific tissue chemistry. They're almost like the snail mail of nutrients. And so there's been all this cool work in the last several years, decade, but really the last 5 or 6 years, showing that there's bile acids that go specifically to certain parts of the prefrontal cortex of the brain, and they bring a little nutrient called ornithine or some of these small molecules that are specific to regions in mice. This is work out of UCSD by Peter Dorstein. And the long story short is that it's just a cool story. It's like we thought this is what this molecule was for. We only thought of bile acids as excreting, and it plays a role in hormone secretion and stuff like that, right? Getting estrogen out of the body. But it turns out that it's so much more. It's so much more. And we're just at the tip of the iceberg of understanding. I think of these as like nutrients and vitamins and minerals that we just didn't know we even needed, right? And the microbiome is part of this system of making them for our body. And so every time we learn about new postbiotics or small molecules, it turns out that they play these super important, crucial roles that we're just starting to unravel in our immune, brain, metabolic kind of access with the microbiome.
So, okay, we are totally going down a tangent because I'm really fascinated with bile acids as well, and I only know a little bit about them. But what I do understand a little more about is like just bile in the body and how important it is to have it be thin enough and have it be copious enough so that it's doing its job moving things out of the body. Are we
Mhm.
talking about the same thing in
Yeah.
essence?
So imagine that there's that role, right, that we've known about for a really long time. But
Mhm.
because it's nature and it's complicated, there's a whole nother suite of things that bile acids are also required to do and needed and play a role. I mean, I really think of the microbiome as a hormone organ, endocrine organ.
Mm.
And it is making molecules in the case of bile acids or tryptophan derivatives that function as hormones throughout our body. We just didn't know about them until relatively recently. And so, yes, you need bile to do the excretion phase, but you also need the microbes to have access. We used to think there was originally like in the textbooks, there was four bile acids that would get conjugated and deconjugated. And now there's exponentially, like tens of thousands of different kinds
Oh,
that
wow.
we just didn't even know because, it's until you look, how are you going to find it out? And all of the little differences in how these bile acids are metabolized or like processed by the bugs into postbiotics changes their role. And if you don't have the right mixture of bugs to make the right mixture of bile acids, then you miss out on all these different roles that they're playing. And so, one of the places we think about with hormone regulation and gut microbiome is again, this is an endocrine organ that's central to our ability to excrete exogenous estrogen and bind and balance and play a role in maturation of everything from cholesterol and our immune cells and metabolic roles to even hormone signaling. And so it's an exciting time. The short answer is there's like so much we don't know, but we have little whispers of examples that just sort of when I found out that there was like a whole nother role the bile acids play other than the traditional one that we thought of. I just was like, "Oh, that's so cool. It's gonna be true for everything that we just haven't bothered to look at yet."
Thank you for going down that rabbit hole with me. I'll, I'll try to steer us back into the Thaena conversation, but I think it's all really relevant because it's all connected. Can you explain to us how Thaena is different than a fecal microbiome transplant?
Yeah, and I will just say to dovetail
Oh, sure.
onto the bile acids, imagine you have a microbiome that's sad. I have a microbiome that's sad. I was born via C-section, was chronically ill. I took antibiotics and medications my whole life. So, like, there's a bunch of bile acids I can't make probably.
Mm.
And so the ThaenaBiotic is sort of a replacement for those core nutrients that my sad autoimmune inflamed microbiome can't make. And it's just an extension of that conversation. So the way that ThaenaBiotic is different than fecal transplant is there are no live bugs, there's no live viruses. There's no infectious disease risk, but there are bile acids and short chain fatty acids and all these nutrient postbiotics that a healthy microbiome is making that you, as a person who has something maybe out of balance, or it works both ways. So if you haven't pooped in a couple days, it can help you get moving again. It helps with motility and stimulating, at least anecdotally from patients that have, given us feedback and my own personal experience too. It's that it turns everything back on. And then on the other side is if you are have too much motility, it can slow things down and kind of tell everything to calm down and reduce that inflammatory feedback loop. And so even though it's definitely not fecal transplant and it's definitely not alive, and there's things about FMT that are definitely stronger, more potent, it still has a component of complexity that comes from healthy people in the form of these nutrient mixture postbiotics.
Yeah, and I think just that the modulation of the microbiome that you just discussed, like if you have too much, if you're having diarrhea, I'm just going to use some common words too instead of too much motility, or in addition to that, just so people can follow along. And then if you're not enough motility, i.e. constipation, Thana can typically modulate that with you. They don't make any claims obviously, but those are things that they're seeing with people. And one thing I wanted to ask, do you know that study where they did a rat or a mouse, I can't remember which it was, where they did FMT into an obese mouse and then vice versa? Can you explain that? Because that really stuck in my head about how this works.
Yeah, the famous mouse, the fat mouse, skinny mouse study heard around the world.
Yes.
I mean, I think before fecal transplant was reintroduced properly in like 2008, but really started getting studied in the early 2010s, the concept that our microbiome could impact our metabolism or our brain or our immune system was kind of heretical. Like neurologists would say, what you eat is not going to impact your mental health. We know better, but there just wasn't good mechanistic understanding of that or proof, right? And so what happened with fecal transplant is that you started seeing all these really cool studies where they would take human poop and put it into mice and see what happened, or you would take a mouse that was designed to be obese and you would, take their microbiome and put it into a skinny mouse. There was studies done in old mouse, so old mice microbiome being given to young mice, and the young mice would get old and then the old mice would get young. And so the implication from all of this was that you could show mechanistically or causally with a control in mice that the microbiome would impact your metabolic state. So the obese mouse got skinny when it got the microbiome of the skinny mouse, and vice versa. And so much so that they even did a couple of really big fecal transplant clinical studies. And fascinatingly, which I'm sure you'll have insight on, the first couple were done in only men. There was some shifts and noticeable weight loss, I think. There was like some promising data in the early small cohorts. But then they did a big study called the TRIM study. They included women, and it was like kind of a wash because hormones and people are complicated. And basically the takeaway was the microbiome does impact metabolic things, and we see that with GLP-1. GLP-1's made by the gut. It's a stimulated response to postbiotics. It just normally lasts a couple hours, not 6 days. That's the difference between GLP-1 and the nutrient version, induced version and the prescription one. But I still think it's a good model of, like, this impacts all of the downstream
Mhm.
role that our satiety it makes sense, right? Why would you not have mechanisms of control around digestion and satiety if you're the organ in the gut, right? And all that is to say, it really challenged our fundamental understanding. And then when it was translated to humans, the takeaway was it's still more complicated, but
Mhm.
there is definitely something to be said for microbiome is going to change the way a calorie in and calorie out is not real. And that is because our microbiome impacts the role a calorie has on
Mhm.
our end metabolic input. And the same thing with the old mouse and young mouse, it changed the way that the brain cells were developing. And it's cool because it shows that this all matters, but I would say the takeaway is not that if you eat skinny people's poop, you'll get skinny. That said, our donors are really healthy, skinny people, but it's just more complicated, but it is a reflection that the microbiome is like another layer of modulation in this bigger picture.
I wanna just do kind of a quick little question about can Thena help so most of my listeners are women, and a lot of them come to me and say, "Well, now that you've seen me, what can you do for my husband?" And a lot of them are wondering when I tell them about Thena, they're like, "Will it make him less gassy?"
Yeah, 100%.
So
I mean, I can't yes, I think so.
right. Right, and so it's great. So, like, this is a product for men and women,
Oh, yeah,
right?
definitely.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. It's good to know kinda who this is made for.
It's made for anybody who is out of balance in the gut and or not making the right nutrients. I mean, we have people who use it just for wellness and longevity,
Mhm.
and then we have really sick people that have been through, post chemo recovery or they've had part of their colon removed and this really seems to help them. And so it's a nutrient, right? And we don't have RCT studies yet, but the basic premise and the piggybacking we're doing off of fecal transplant work and our understanding of microbiome and probiotics and nutrients all are leading us in the direction that this is just a good multi
Mm.
microbiome multivitamin.
Oh, I love that framing of it. That's really awesome. Okay, well, so if we can go back a few minutes in your timeline or a few years, like what inspired you to create Thana? It's so outside the box.
Ooh, yeah, I mean, I think I am a scientist. Sometimes it's hard to own that, but I was trained as a scientist and my whole life I was like on track to go do a PhD and be in academia. And, I made it through high school labs in the summer and college immunology and biochemistry degree and summer research. And after undergrad, several years as a researcher in a lab. And then part of a PhD, and it wasn't until I was 25 and had been doing this for a decade, being a lab scientist and thinking about how cells communicate, that I really jumped ship because my sister was diagnosed with the cancer that I had been studying in my graduate work. And she's been in remission and has done well, but I took 2 years and was her full-time caregiver
Yeah.
and patient advocate through that process of living in the hospital. She had bone cancer or blood cancer. And I just it was mad at the way that we don't recognize suffering and human suffering as a component of our experience within medicine. And our metrics are morbidity and mortality, right? That's what people talk about
Mhm.
is how long did you live or, how long did it take you to die? And there isn't a metric for what your lived experience is
Mhm.
of that trauma, chronic disease, whatever it is. And I felt like there had to be a set of tools to help people navigate this world. I have a chronic disease. I've had ankylosing spondylitis and rheumatoid arthritis since I was a little kid, right? So I get it. I know you're always navigating the system and trying to kind of choose the least worst
Mhm.
answer. And so becoming a naturopath was a cool diversion from my what was a very linear path in academia. And I was just trying to look at all the tools. I loved it. I loved becoming a naturopath because I was like, finally, some logical recognition that the thousands of years of Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine and traditional indigenous medicines like has value in supporting human health. And I mean, you know that, but it just
Mm.
was a really big paradigm shift for me. And so then I started looking at, well, what's the mechanism and how does nutrition really impact us? And the microbiome was right there. The microbiome was just this central role of understanding how these things that we've been talking about make sense on a like I said, fecal transplant fundamentally challenged the way neurologists think about
Mhm.
nutrition,
Yeah.
which is great. And so ThaenaBiotic was just a practical solution to the fact that fecal transplant is really cool. And I wanted to help people have access to healthy people's poop because I don't have poop that is healthy and I know what it's like to struggle. And my answer is the kitchen sink toolbox, and tools are really important. And as long as they're safe, I really changed my framing of what we need in terms of irrefutable RCT conventional data to feel confident that you can have tools in your toolbox that will help people reduce suffering. I don't think we're going to treat disease, but I think we can just make the lived experience a little bit less terrible sometimes, some days, and that makes all the difference.
It does. And I
It's a
think
very long answer,
no,
sorry.
beautiful answer. Thank you for sharing that personal story. And I'm so grateful to hear that your sister is in remission. And I can't think of a better caregiver and patient advocate to have on your side when you're going through that. Like you would
Man, those dogs hated me so much.
I'm sure that you are not a favorite, but that is what it takes to
Mhm.
advocate for someone. And that is like, I am on a mission about radical autonomy. And I just think that the only way we can do that when we're sick is that we have to have someone on our side. And so for you to do that for your sister is such a gift. It kind of makes me tear up because so many people don't have that person in their lives
Yeah.
with A, the willingness, and B, the smarts to be able to do it and be able and willing to not be the favorite person in the hospital room. And so I just want to honor you for that because what a gift. That's incredible. And it just leads me to my next question, which is I heard you on another podcast talking to the host and talking about your donors. And one of the things that really piqued my interest in that conversation was you said if someone's had a big life event or a big stress event, that you kind of put them on hold. And I was hoping you could just kind of talk about that a little bit and just that connection between the nervous system and our microbiome and whatever else you see involved in that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we don't know how to define health. We've been on a journey to do that for a long time. But what we do know is stressors and all the different variables that are hitting us on a day to day basis matter, right? And so when one of our best, most healthiest, amazing, magical mountains of Colorado donor, who I love so much, he's so great. His dad passed away and he reached out to us, and we have a really our goal is to have a pretty personal relationship with the donors or at least stay in really close contact with them. And our immediate response was like, we're so sorry and our condolences, and we're going to put you on pause for, 3 months and check back in, see how it goes. Because that's a big thing for you to have to navigate. Even if you're a healthy human and the relationship is good and all the things, grief is a very important part of the human experience. And it's going to shift your hormone, your inflammatory cytokines, whatever, all of
Right.
the things, our vagus nerve. And we just recognize that. And so we had him pause and then we checked back in. And I think it was 3 months later where he was like, yeah, that was good. I'm glad I did that. And I feel back on track and I'm ready to start up. Same thing with another male donor who his wife had a baby. And you would be like, "Oh, well, he's the dad. It doesn't matter." And where we were like, "No, it does matter because he is also gonna be sleep deprived." Like, having a new baby fundamentally changes everything about your life and your stress and your sleep habits, and even though everybody was happy and healthy and the things they had in place were great and resourced and whatever, we waited, and 6 months later, we were like, "Okay, what is your sleep habits? Are you back to getting 8 hours of sleep? Do you have a system?" If you do go through a period of regression, sleep regression, don't collect because we don't want that. That definition of health to the best of our ability, is what we're striving for.
Yeah, and I think I have this weird little goal that, like, I wanna be the person that you wanna collect from. Like, I want to be that healthy that Thana's like, "I want your poop."
We are always looking for donors. They can go to our website and take the quiz. The
Nice.
preliminary intake is, were you vaginally born? Were you breastfed? Ideally for 2 years, ideally exclusively breastfed, no formula. Less than 5 antibiotics in your lifetime and never had any chronic diseases or major medical diagnoses. It's okay if you had a broken bone or your wisdom teeth were taken out. But other than that, we want you to be healthy and then you don't eat ultra processed food. So, we go through a diet diary. We do a really, that's kind of the minimum. So if any of your donors are listening and they're still hanging on and they're like, yeah, that's me, go take the survey. And then the longer quiz is, many pages. And then we do an interview and then we do blood and stool and serum testing or in urine
Wow.
testing.
That's
Mhm.
amazing, and so that kinda leads me into when I took Thana, because I try everything that comes in my office, anything that I sell or share, I try it. I sometimes I don't need things. I
Yeah,
try them.
totally. It's important. I do the same thing. I
Yeah, and so
totally.
we're our own guinea beauties for sure. And so I did try Thana, and I had an interesting reaction to
Yeah.
Thana. So I like to talk about this because even though what we determined when I talked to you about this is that we determined that it was not something that I need. It wasn't bad for me, but it wasn't something that I needed. And I want to share that because I think it's really interesting to look at all sides of things. And so what happened for me was that I took Thana and my poop started smelling different. And I know that's a weird thing to talk about. People's like, well, everybody's poop stinks, whatever. But it's interesting when it smells different because you know your smell. And sometimes if you eat something really weird and your poop smells funny, it kind of, you're just surprised by it. So my poop just smelled stronger and a little different. And I was like, huh, that's interesting. And I had a little bit of aftertaste, and it wasn't gross or bad or anything like that. It was just something that I noticed. And I thought, okay, well, that's that. And then I talked to Andrea about it, and we talked a little bit about what kind of testing I've had in the past. And so I have done a little bit of gut mapping, and I know that I have lots of Akkermansia in my body. I know that my vaginal micro or flora is all really, really good because I recently had that tested because, and I'm going to tangent for 1 second, because I had some vaginal itching. I knew it wasn't yeast. I knew it wasn't bacterial vaginosis. I thought that there was some microbiome stuff going on in my flora in my vagina, and it wasn't. So I had it all tested. Turns out it was low estrogen, but that's a different thing. But I always like to plug that. So if you have vaginal itchiness and you don't have those other things, it is probably low estrogen. Not always, but probably. So anyway, we knew all of those things were good. And so when Andrea and I talked about it, we just determined that it's not something that my system needs, right? Is that
Yeah, and I would say we brought a 7-cap pack to market because I still don't know. Always surprises me when people are like, "This thing totally changed my insomnia," or "This thing totally helped
Mhm,
with my, mood," or "This thing totally gave me the perfect poop of my life." And other people where I'm like, "Yeah, this is definitely gonna be the thing for you." They're like, "No, it just kinda made things go too fast." And I never know really the prediction there, but
mhm,
the goal with our approach to patients is that try it in 7 days, you'll know.
mhm.
And if you are looking for something, if you have a suspicion that you're fundamentally like missing one of these nutrients, right? And you feel like you're out of balance, that's a good time to try it. And then you'll know in a couple days if it's
Yeah,
really going to be the right fit for you.
yeah.
Some people take it forever. Some people take it for a few months, 1 cap a day. We do have a total money back guarantee on the 30-cap bottle, but we also sell the 7-cap as just like a sampler to give it a shot because there's so much about the microbiome we don't know. And I don't know what metabolic shift happened for you, but
Right.
it is sort of we're all a unique magical snowflake in our microbiome.
It's so true. And that's what I loved about it was that, and that is why I feel so passionate about it though, is because
Mhm.
it worked so fast in my body to do what it was doing. And I've likewise had my brother-in-law took the 7-pack and he had results that lasted months. he hasn't bitten the bullet and bought the next bottle, but I keep telling him, I'm like, you had such great results, let's go for the next one." And he did need it. I don't even understand what is happening to my body, but I feel so much better. And I was like, "Great." And I hear that time and time again when it's the right person.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, I mean, I think the beauty of it as a supplement is use it as needed. There's no rules about you have to take it a certain way. We recommend 1 cap a day, but I mean, if you were ever to call me and be like, "Hey, I just went to Mexico, I got noro, I'm miserable, what do you recommend?" Then I would say give it a shot. That might be
Mhm.
the time it's the right fit for you.
Absolutely.
Not that it's gonna treat noro, but it'll help you kind of recover from that kind of perturbation.
Right, and I will always have it around for myself or for others because for things like that, when there's digestive things that are just or microbiome things that just don't seem like I could figure them out otherwise. And that is a great segue into the pulsing. Like, you have your one a day kind of recommendation. It is a pricey product and well worth it. But I know that you can open the capsules and kind of microdose it too. What are some recommendations around that?
Yeah, especially for sensitive patients. I mean, I worked in functional GI, as a naturopath doing GI, and there's just people who are sensitive to everything, and it never hurts to go low and slow. So you can absolutely open the cap. We have lots of patients that do that. Don't ask me how it still works. I don't know, but it's I mean a lot and I mean I have an idea. These small molecules are very stable, so they will get through the stomach acid and they will make it to the colon. And so that's probably why you can open it up and just use a fraction of a capsule, quarter or half. And you can do that, once every 3 days and or change it up. And then in the opposite direction, if you have a lot going on and you take 1 cap for a couple days and it doesn't do anything, you can take 2 caps. Anytime I get sick or out of balance, I take 2 caps twice a day, and that
Oh,
is generally a pretty good reset for me for a couple days, and then I don't take it for a while. I want to empower people and people who are working with people in the wellness space with supplements to just do some of your own trial and error. It's fine to use it as needed, and it's fine to do some pulse dosing. And sometimes that even seems to be beneficial for people. We've had patients where they have really kind of functional constipation. They take this, it helps them. They have really healthy bowel movements. And then there's sort of a limiting return after a month or two. But if you stop it and then come back to it, you can get that motility induced again. Don't ask me why, but those are some of the observations we've had so far.
I love those. One of the questions that I've had recently from a client who is interested in this is what about allergies? If your donors are eating gluten, dairy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We did test, and that was an important thing for us to understand. Our donors don't restrict their diet. So we don't have anybody on a restricted diet because the hope is that they don't have any allergies. And one of the red flags is people who have disordered eating or, are coming to us. We want them to be able, in theory, to eat everything. That said, some of them really don't eat red meat and some of them don't eat a lot of bread. One of them makes his own homemade bread. So there is trace amounts of shellfish and peanuts and parts per million of even gluten, but it's denatured. And so what we have found is that most people who even have some of those food intolerances, this will actually help them with tolerance. So like if you're not great with dairy, some of our celiac patients do really well with this. I would say it's a threshold issue. If you have anaphylaxis to something, don't, just be aware that there could be trace amounts of this. We haven't had any reporting of anaphylactic reaction. In fact, there's several people who have anaphylactic to shellfish, for example, and every once in a while he feels like it gets a little bit itchy, but he doesn't have a full reaction and it just is dependent on the bottle. So, I mean, I want to be really transparent. I encourage people to ask us questions. We don't test every batch for parts per million of allergens, just every few batches. And so I can't give you exact numbers on the order you make, but that is something we're thinking about doing in the future is just because it takes so much material to do.
Right, right. No, that's a great answer. I was wondering if it kinda could work that way where it could help you if you
Yeah, it
do have
helps
a lot
people
of
and
sensitivities have
mhm,
worse.
reintroduce foods. There's a
Mhm,
component of this that's probably inducing tolerance and turning off that feedback loop
mhm,
that inherently makes us more reactive, in
mhm,
theory. That's
mhm.
kind of I mean, there's so much we don't know, but that's kind of the feedback is that it sort of helps you eat more diverse things, and my dairy friends really love it.
I bet. I bet. That's so exciting to see how that's gonna just shift for people because it's nice to be able to eat all the things, all the healthy
As
things.
long as they're not,
Yeah.
eating or
Not
whatever.
not too many of the unhealthy things. And so back when we were kinda going down the rabbit hole, we talked a little bit about butyrate, and I was wondering, so when you're taking Thaena, just kind of as a practical stacking idea, are you, like, encouraging a prebiotic, a probiotic, Thaena, and a butyrate, or are we kind of, like, covering all those bases with Thaena? Kinda what does that look like roughly?
Your audience can't hear me shaking my head being like,
I know.
"It's complicated, there's a lot of
Yeah.
nuance." Um, I think Thena's a really good microbiome modulator, and I think it can be complementary to a lot of things,
Mhm.
but I also wanna recognize that we're all kinda supplemented to death,
Mhm.
and I like taking ThaenaBiotic with things like an acetylcysteine
Mm.
or, if you're a SIBO-y person, like with the berberine or the biocidin, it's a nice complement to other pathways.
Mhm.
If you're doing hormone support or you're taking DIM, it's great to go with that. If you have a probiotic you love to death and it's like your tried and true, this isn't gonna hurt taking with it. I think the most important thing, more so than protein is fiber. And so I wish people could have even a fraction of the fervor we have for protein right now for fiber. But, if this could help you tolerate prebiotics and fibers and polyphenols, that's where I would start doing, because again, this has micrograms of butyrate, so it's gonna help your microbiome be in an environment to make butyrate, but we need 20 grams of fiber to be making the kind of butyrate we need to be healthy. I did a back of the envelope calculation one time because I was just curious, like, healthy people have upwards of 10 grams of butyrate in their GI tract getting recycled. So,
Mhm.
this product that's 100 milligrams in total and a small fraction is butyrate, it's not gonna replace that, but it is gonna help your body be prepared to make butyrate if you give it the precursors. So, prebiotic, chia seeds, overnight oats, psyllium,
Mhm.
with a polyphenol, I think is really important, is the most important complement to this that I can think of.
And when you say fiber and you want the fervor there, are you talking, soluble and insoluble fiber? Both?
Yeah, and, not surprisingly, right, like, the microbiologists have basically wrote a really funny paper. There's no such thing as insoluble fiber. It's,
Oh.
like, the same as calories. There's like, what's insoluble to you is different than what's insoluble to me, and so there's, like, a whole movement to just be like, "Eat more plants. Eat more fibrous things," because we know so little about how our digestion works, and yes, all
Okay.
of the above. I
Okay.
mean, what you can tolerate, obviously, I work with patients, especially who, if I was like, "You gotta eat more beans and lentils," they would, like, be like, "You're gonna murder me."
Mhm. Yeah.
But if you can slowly inch your way into, start with, like, a polyphenol powder,
Mhm.
because that has, like, blueberry or cranberry or, like, a good sourced organic powders, and then you add something in, like FOS or GOS or pectin or mushrooms or beta glucans, anything that you can tolerate. And then if you can get to the level where I am at, where I try to have chia soaked overnight in kefir plus nuts and berries plus beans every
Mhm.
day, they're very different. It's a stepwise to get there.
Oh, I love that. I that sounds like something that, we need to make a little handout, for our clients to just have that stepped fiber, like how to increase your fiber. I love that. I just never really thought of it in those terms. It's a really great approach to that.
Well, and you can't do it fast, right? Like, they've
Right.
shown that if you have low microbiome diversity and you throw a bunch of fiber at people, it makes them more inflamed.
Oh, yeah.
And so it has to be very low and slow,
Mhm.
and the ThaenaBiotic is a good tool to help that
Uh-huh.
transition happen. If nothing else, if I can bring the bring to people is the ability to eat some fiber.
Yes, yes. It's nothing worse than people come in and they go, "Every time I eat a salad, I feel like I'm 9 months pregnant," And
I
I'm like, "Okay,
know.
we need to work on how are we processing this and what's the mechanism of action here, and let's work on
And you have
that."
to cook things
Yeah,
first, and
yeah, and that's
that's where you gotta start.
very
I mean, Kitchery
yeah.
maybe where you start.
It is, it's amazing, and speaking of low and slow, so I'm loving semaglutide and tirzepatide low
Mhm.
and slow for systemic inflammation as well.
Yep.
I
Mhm.
am much more of a fan of that process than looking at it as a weight loss drug. Or
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
and and I'm just saying drug, it's really not, it's a peptide. I guess my question is, how does that work with Thana? Is that
Oh,
something
yeah, it's a great
people
compliment. One of our main goals is to help people with motility, right? And that's, like,
Mhm,
where I think ThaenaBiotic really shines, and it complements the mechanisms of tirzepatide to the GLP-1 agonists.
mhm,
And so I think it's a great support,
okay.
especially I mean, low doses, people I mean, I'm taking it. I'll be, like, transparent, my personal experience, right? Like, I have pretty horrific chronic pain and autoimmune disease that I'm always, like, bop-a-mole with, but I'm trying to stay off of prednisone and big drugs, and so I had enough friends be like, "Give this a try," and I've had no issues with GI, and it has, I think, finally started to reduce my inflammation, but,
Mhm.
like, I feel really confident that I know I'm getting the nutrients I need, and I'm not gonna have any GI issues because I have my poop pills and my fiber and my systems. And so what we're looking at is doing some more intentional clinical research and tracking. We're gonna have an app in, like, a
Mm,
week or 2, hopefully, where if people come to buy the product and they wanna track their bowel movements and their experience, in particular if they're on GLP-1 agonists, we would love to do some citizen science and collect that data and give you some money back or discounts on the product because I do think we're all chronically inflamed. There's no wrong answers in the
mhm,
apocalypse, and we've kind of created a microbiome apocalypse amongst other. And
mhm,
so I think this is a really good complement for GLP-1s, and I do love that people are getting access to them at low dose and that, you know, I think that's where a lot of the side effects are mitigated because blood sugar is one of the biggest issues we have with inflammation. So,
mhm.
yeah, I love it. I think it's great. I'm on it. I think,
Awesome. I
yeah.
was I in my brain it worked, but I really wanted to ask you
Mhm.
to see what your thoughts were so that it just confirms what I was thinking about that for sure.
Mhm.
So let's shift into a little bit of rapid fire fun because we have been really heady, super brainy. I hope people are still with us because we got really nerdy here. Would I love it? I'm going to ask you a couple of quick questions. You can just do short answers or long if you want. But what is a myth about gut health that just drives you crazy?
That there's one size fits all.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. What is the weirdest biohack or thing you've ever tried in the name of science?
Hookworms.
Ooh, you've actually taken them?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's a whole nother level. Coffee enemas, yes or no?
I don't dislike them. I don't love them. I mean, I don't personally I've had many patients that swear by them, and I like to listen to my patients, but they're not top of my list. I got other weird things.
I know. It's just one of the things. Who or what would be your dream collaboration next?
I really want a gut test that actually tells me what I want to know, and so
Mm,
I'm dreaming of something that gives me a functional readout instead of just the names of the bugs.
that would be incredible.
Yeah, I'm working on it, but also, the scientists that could make that happen, that's my dream collaboration.
Okay. I love it. So, if you weren't doing gut health and Thana, what would you be doing?
Permaculture. I would
Oh,
be on a permaculture farm.
you're a farmer. I love it. Oh, well, this is just it's so full of such great information. Do you have hope in the microbiome medicine future?
Yeah,
And can you talk
definitely.
to us about that for a minute?
Yeah, I would say, part of the reason I pivoted and, even before I really went into medicine research, I was interested in climate. science, and it was too depressing. But there's a lot of analogies with climate science and our microbiome, except the big difference, and the reason I love it is because we have agency and autonomy over our decisions. And the more information we have, the more power we have to make educated decisions, even if they're imperfect.
Hmm.
We have control over decisions about how we eat and drink and think and live. And I really, really love that as a child of chronic disease in pediatric hospitals and rheumatologists, and really not having a sense of agency over my body when I was a sick kiddo, to come to an adult space and know that I can biohack and take supplements and change my lifestyle. And yes, I make decisions that are poor sometimes because I'm human, but I think it's so important that we regain a sense of agency over who we are and how we are able to make decisions about our health in a way that puts safety back, right? And like the reality is we're all stuck in situations that are less than ideal. But if we have information to make educated decisions, and the microbiome for me is a really great truth test of, do those decisions matter and how do I like inch my way towards my goals? I just think that's so important. And I think it gives that to people who are trying to get their health back and have been told that they're crazy and there's nothing that they can do. And I love knowing that all these one way tracks that we've been told, if you have a diagnosis and you can only get worse, is totally wrong, right? Like we know we can reverse disease with all kinds of things. I think that gives me the most hope as somebody who has been dealing with chronic disease my whole life. And I think that's really important for people broadly to take away.
Oh, that is beautiful. Thank you. That's incredible. As we kind of, are wrapping up, is there anything else that you want to share before we wrap up?
I just want to invite people to try and join us on this journey. It's maybe not the right fit for everybody. I don't want people to perceive this as a magic bullet, but I do want people to feel empowered to have more diversity of tools in their toolbox. And I appreciate them listening and learning. And come join us, join the data tracking. Give us your feedback, and thank you for having me talk on your podcast. And I would love to, keep doing that too.
Thank you. And can you tell us, like, how can people access Thaena? And I know that there's a link that connects them with me. I do get a little benefit from that. So it supports, the menopause midwife, and it helps me give care to people who can't afford care. And
Yeah.
I really like to do that. So if people don't mind using the link that Andrea is going to give you, that would really help us out today. So
Yeah, and so we were originally through providers only, and we recently switched to direct to consumer, which I'm really proud of and excited for. Thaena.com, Thaena, not the most practical, but if you remember, it's weird and kind of Greek. It's Thaena.com/ the menopause midwife. And if you go to that URL, it'll ask you for a login and it allows you to buy the product at a discount. So regular price is $199 for a 30 cap bottle. You get $50 off. So it's $149. And then there's a money back guarantee on that 30 cap bottle too. So if you try it and you don't love it or whatever, no questions asked on that. Or you can buy a 7 cap pack. It's normally 50, but you can get it for 40 with the link. And then there's also a 90 cap for people who want to keep taking this long term and it's most cost effective. And that's $499 if you just go to the website, but you get $100 off if you use the link. So definitely use the URL, and it's an affiliate link. And then I want to encourage you all to give us feedback. There'll be discounts if you want to collect data. We're trying to make it accessible and still maintain the science. We're a new company in the sense that it's small. We have a small team and we're still we've been around for 5 years, but also yesterday, right?
it's so amazing. And then do you guys have any socials that people should be checking out?
Oh my gosh, I should know this. It's at Thaena Inc. on Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah, check us out on Instagram.
Yeah, and we'll put all of this in the show notes. So if it's all at all confusing for people, you can just look up spellings. I do have one final fun little question that I love to ask. And it is that you're stuck on a desert island, but lucky you get to pack an apothecary. What 3 to 5 supplements or products are you bringing and why? And you get bonus points if they're multitaskers or weirdly specific.
Ooh, I definitely would bring Thaena Biotic
Uh-huh.
because that's gonna protect me. There'll be plenty of fiber, so I don't need chia, but I would bring electrolytes.
Oh.
Probably bring, like, a salt or a good
Mhm.
electrolyte, and then I would probably bring charcoal too, just as a
Mm.
backup.
Mhm.
So that would cover all the, like, infectious things and the dehydration, and then I'd be getting, like, lots of sun and deliciousness and things like that, so I would probably just add an N-acetylcysteine as my go-to kind of as maintenance.
Very nice. I like that. You know what? It's funny. Charcoal is on almost everybody's list.
Oh, interesting.
Such a
I
good
mean,
one. Yeah.
tried and true.
Yep, I know. If you've ever had to use charcoal for anything, you know that it's amazing, and it's, like, the cheapest thing out there, and it's wonderful. Oh, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been just a joy to chat with you. I have learned so much, and I hope people have learned as well, and I hope if they have more questions, they're gonna reach out to you, to me, somehow to just get more information. And if this episode has made you laugh, squirm, or rethink your gut health, share it with a friend, subscribe, and leave a review. And thank you for joining us, Dr. Dre.
Thank you for joining me here today on the Menopause Midwife. If you'd like more information or to work with me, feel free to check out my website and book a wellness consultation at ohm406.com. Be well.